Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is an old friend of mine, Tim Bailey, President of Bailey Consulting, but actually has been president of a number of organizations here in Japan in the past before you started your own consulting business. So, Tim, just wind us back a little bit through your career. How is it that you're able to run companies in Japan, and how is it you're able to function as consultant here in Japan, helping companies do turnarounds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, first, very, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm very fortunate in many ways. And I think a lot had to do with probably the first half of my career in corporate America. I went to school as a finance guy, thought finance guys kind of ran the world. I had this naive thought that someday I'd kind of run the world. And so, I was an accounting guy and, an auditor and controller of a small little company, and then decided that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And went back to school, got a master's at night, and was fortunate to go to Black & Decker Power Tools. I had some internships when I was younger, and it's a little bit of nepotism, which is rare in the States. My father had 34 years there. I had a brother at 11 years there. And which is in itself a little unique for a Fortune 200 company at the time. But I was fortunate. I came in and I got a chance to participate in a number of different roles, entry-level product roles, product development roles, marketing roles. They had a strong belief to get into leadership type roles. Sales was probably one of the better ways to do it, where you could, mentor and develop people and move forward. I later got into global product development roles. Program management. And then I had this aspiration, after about a 10-year mark, that I wanted to really run a full P&L, full business. And the one thing I didn't have was manufacturing operations. I had led them in cross-functional teams, but I had never done it myself. So I kind of got off the road and went down to Tampa, Florida, because I was in the Baltimore, D.C. area for most of my career, and went to run a manufacturing facility. And it was like drinking from a firing hose at one point. And I'll never forget, I went to the boss at the time, and I said, "Hey, Trevor, man," I said, and he goes, "Look, it's common sense. When in doubt, it's common sense. It's people, it's process. You know how to do it. Just go do it." And did that for 15 years. And then I was traveling the world. There was a time where I was going to Europe 8 or 9 times a year. We had a facility in southern Germany. I would take these Asian trips a couple of times, only kind of through Japan. It was really China or Taiwan. And I got a call from a headhunter recruiter to come do kind of a turnaround in China, Hong Kong. And I didn't really take it that serious at first. But, I'm like, hey, this could be interesting. So I went over, and I ended up having a 5-year contract. And I had a flat in Hong Kong, but I pretty much lived in a place it was Shenzhen, a suburb of Shenzhen called Shaoxing at the time. We had...
what year would this be?
What year? That was 2005.
So Shenzhen, by that time, is really, really powering up and running. It was just, incredible growth. Amazing city from nothing, basically. A bunch of villages turns into a megapolis. So it would have been hammering.
And we had, you've heard the big companies like Foxconn and everything else, but we had 38,000 people on property. I had 6,000 underneath me, 150 engineers. Couldn't talk to one of the manufacturing people. Barely could talk to my top manufacturing lady.
And that's because?
Language.
Language, okay. Mm-hmm.
But this company, it was Johnson Electric, number 1, number 2 micromotor guy in the world. Always went back and forth with a Japanese one, Mabuchi. And they were fantastic at operations, fantastic, absolutely world class. But where we needed some help was more on the development side, really trying to expand these businesses. I was the 4th guy running the business in 28 months. And
that's a pretty high turnover.
It was. And the recruiter forgot to tell me that part.
Yeah, left a bit out, did he?
Yeah. Okay. And it was, and I'd scratch my head at times because I grew up in a B2C business, and this was now B2B, making motors. And there were segments like, it was power tools. I later got into home office and Hewlett-Packard's and Microsoft, stuff like that. But kind of fast forward, I used a lot of the processes and the learnings that I had at Black & Decker that I applied there. And also learned a ton. I was a sponge. But we took some like 4% operating income businesses, built these 20% operating income businesses. And I just kind of felt the world was my oyster at that point. So after doing that for 5 years, I was like, okay, I want to try something new. And
Just on that point, though,
Yeah.
I was actually having a conversation earlier this morning with a client, and we were talking about decision making and speed. And
Sure.
they're actually making the conversation around China is quite fast in decision making compared to Japan.
Sure.
Korea quite fast compared to Japan. India quite fast compared to Japan. But Japan, Korea, China, these days,
Yep.
not many mistakes. Fast and pretty solid. India, still working on it.
Sure.
I wonder what was China like at that time. Were they very quick in execution, but executing without having lots of defects and problems? Are they at that stage? Have they gotten past that, or this came later?
Well, I will tell you, the company that I was working for and the gentleman who took it over from his father, they were absolutely world-class in process. And interesting, they used to bring some Japanese leaders over to do Kaizen events in the manufacturing site. So they were buttoned down. I mean, it wasn't Wild Wild West, although some of our suppliers were in that regard. But I think it was really evolving, and it kind of depended by company. I remember years before, we would travel over. Black & Decker would meet Walmart. We would work with their group, and then we'd meet some other suppliers. And this is a little bit of a joke, but we'd say, "Hey, can you make this? And can you make it purple?" And they absolutely. And they ran the back office and said, "What is purple?" Because they wanted to.
You're talking about the Chinese suppliers
The
now.
Chinese suppliers, yeah.
So yes, we can. What's
Yes.
purple?
And
We'll work purple out later.
But it wasn't out of fear, and it wasn't out of probably the sense that you might think of Japan of wanting to please. You were business. We wanted your business, and we were going to find a way to do it.
If it's got to be purple, we'll
We'll do
the
purple,
damn thing
and we'll go
purple.
figure out what purple is.
Yeah.
Versus kind of here, which is probably a little bit more careful, a little bit more thoughtful, more risk adverse in that regard. But it's these cities at the time, like Shenzhen. I mean, you had these mass people that would come from the farms. They would come over there. We would train them, and then they would go home for the Chinese New Year, and you'd hope they'd come back. These migrations were huge. Over time, I think there was a little bit more stability. But yes,
There's also the whole thing about living permits and their ability to actually live in big cities and go under the radar if they had to, and that type of thing. That's changing now, maybe. But so, how long did you do that for?
did it for 5 years.
So
And
you're like 4 guys in 28 months, and you lasted 5 years. That's pretty impressive.
I did, but I would call my parents up and I would tell them, I said, "I'm getting fired. I'm not, in 6 months, pack my bags." It was kind of like that freshman in college thing. And it was like, yep, it's not going to work. And, it's funny, I even went to my boss at the time, which for a while was an American guy. I'm like, what happened to the other guys? And, it's like, hey, they were told left, they went right, they left, right. It's what they never passed the goal line. So it tested some leadership skills that I'm not even sure I knew I had at the time on trying to assess the drivers of a business and making some tough calls and move forward, and sometimes challenging the status quo of the business and the leadership to try to do what you thought was right. It was an amazing experience. On a side note, you're familiar with probably Clay Christensen and disruption. Well, I had a chance.
Innovator's Dilemma.
Dilemmas. I had twice to be in workshops specifically underneath him.
Wow.
Because our CEO was part of the YPO in Harvard. But the long story is, it was another amazing experience space. And after 5 years, I had a chance to go on. And the company's still doing very well, but I wanted to, it was like leaving college in a good job market. I was like, yeah, the CV was strong. I'm seeing the world. This is great. I want to go do something else. And I was getting calls. And I thought I was going actually to Thailand. I have a strong affinity to Thailand. And I thought I'm going there actually tonight after this interview. But I actually thought I was going
Well, who
there.
doesn't have a strong affinity with Thailand?
Yes,
Now, come
I know.
on, what's there not to like about
This is true.
Thailand? It's a fantastic
good
place. Right?
people. There's a strong tie with here too, actually. But I got a call from an ex-boss, a buddy of mine, and I'm kind of fortunate that my profile We were all kind of dipped the same way. GE, Black & Decker, Danaher, Newell Rubbermaid, American Standard, Westinghouse. A lot of the processes of product development, ideation, delivering results, everything else are very similar. And private equity had a very strong interest in that type of individual. And an old boss, ex-buddy, that was putting a team together to do a turnaround. And he says, hey, you want to come here? I said, no, I'm going to Bangkok. He says, no, you got to come here. And through a bunch of negotiations, he did. And
do the words, I don't know what it was like then, but even now, the words private equity, when they surface, it's like, okay, brace yourself for impact here, because there's no guarantees on anything when the words private equity come in terms of you've already got an existing job, you may have no job. Or they're not happy with it, you're out. It's like it's got that element of brutality associated with it in terms of the imagery. Maybe totally unfair and wrong, but I don't think so. But what did you think about that?
Well, it was an interesting opportunity because I said no to the first offer. Mm-hmm. And then he came back and he gave me another offer. And it wasn't money, but it was responsibility and scope. And I said no to that. And then he said the third one, and I couldn't say no. It was a global business. It was 4 brands. It was a $500 million group. Big brands like Denon and Marantz and Macintosh and Boston Acoustics. And it was a global thing. And I was like, okay, wow. It's a side tangent. Maybe we come back to it. I have some very strong views on private equity and opinions, and I've spent a lot of time with the leadership here. I'm not poo-pooing or saying negative things of private equity in other parts of the world, but I think private equity in Japan is very special. I don't think it has that strong of an image, or should I say maybe sometimes some people may think of a negative image here. And we can probably get into that, but there's a lot of positive attributes, I think, to private equity here.
Well, probably here too. There's just culturally, society-wise, legalistically wise, there's a lot more guardrails here on what companies can do to people and how you can get rid of people. So, America's fairly brutal. As an Aussie, looking at America, I say, wow, that's pretty brutal over there, right? But here, not easy to be that brutal. So I think the guardrails probably make it a little bit more palatable, perhaps, in Japan.
Yeah.
So maybe the better elements come through more.
There are, and I think there's also a longer term play with some of these guys. Mm-hmm. I am very sensitive. I don't mention names, so I won't mention names, but I've dealt with a lot of the big guys here. And some of the big guys who have done some very big deals, they're very thoughtful that if they do something wrong, they know that the other people here will not sell their company to them. So if it's a Hitachi carve out, or if it's a Toshiba carve out, or if it's something like that, they're like, hey, you did this one wrong. We're not. I mean, there's an affinity to the customers. Even a private equity group that supplies Toyota, they're like, although they're selling that company, Toyota's still my customer in these other segments. I want to do right by Toyota. So they either have a longer term play because they know it's the right thing to do, or it's the right business thing to do. I'm not really sure, but they're the same, so it doesn't matter.
Well, it's also the thinking about the employees are not robots. The employees are just not pawns in the game of chess here, and we just move them around. I mean, here the concept is families may be a bit too strong a word, but it's more that side of things, that we have an accountability to the families of our employees. And then the grandparents have an opinion, the parents have an opinion before they've even joined the company. And then the public reputation of the company. If the shame is brought to the reputation of the company, the individuals in the company get that shame, and their families get that shame. So there's a lot of things here which constrict that sort of laissez-faire capitalism that runs riot in America. Well, you can't do that here so easily. So I can imagine if you're talking about buying a company, the people who are selling it are thinking in more than just money.
Absolutely.
Not thinking one-dimensionally. They're thinking a number of levels.
They do. And to go on a side tangent, there is something called a succession problem opportunity here. So post-World War II guys that formed a business and did really well. And now they're at an elderly part of their career and their life, and they're ready to, retire. And a lot of times these guys should sell the company. Us in the West, we'd sell it. That's a retirement. We're going to a warm climate. Not these guys. They have such an affinity for the employees, such an affinity for their suppliers, their customers, everyone else, they will not do that. So what happens is private equity comes in and partners with them. And there's two things that they usually provide. They'll provide some capital and they'll provide some leadership to help. And then the OG son, the owner, will hang on for a while. And then when it's in good hands, then we'll transition off. And those businesses do well in Japan. And they're needed because there's no kids to take it over, or they don't want to do it.
And also often in those family-run companies, there's no succession plan
That's exactly
from
right.
within the company.
That's right.
It's usually the family, if the family want to step into it, and people having less kids, often these days, some of the kids don't want to do it. No, I don't want to succeed, or they don't have the option. So yeah, it gets harder to what do you do with it? You know,
Right.
I can't just leave it, but you keep working until you pop off your perch, and then what happens then? So I think that's a good point.
To your prior question, one of the things that really attracted me to coming here was I had alignment and I had great respect for some of the guys that were coming back together. There were some Black & Decker guys, but also I had a favorable impression of Bain Capital, and I really was eager and looking forward to doing that, and they proved to be a great partner through the process. They had some tough times because if you go back to pre-Lehman, this was the last big deal done in Japan, and everybody knows it. And unfortunately, some banks lost some money through the process. But there was a guy named Tim Collins. I don't know him. I know of him. Did a great job. Put a collection of $1 billion worth of consumer electronics companies together. Smart guy. Either could look at a crystal ball better than anybody, or was lucky. Sold it to Bain the month before the Lehman crash, and Bain's now in a tough situation financially. And so you think that time period around 8 and 9, I came in at end of 10, beginning of 11. They had tried to run some things internally themselves, and they decided that hey, it needed a fresh look and a fresh approach. And I'm sure we'll spend a little time and talk about that. But that was. Put in perspective, I came here February, I don't know.
Just in time for the earthquake, tsunami, and triple nuclear meltdown. Your timing's fantastic.
That was exactly it. And it was so funny because the whole goal was don't allow this company to go bankrupt. Bailey, you and the team, you got to turn this thing around. And I'm like, okay, this is great. We're up for it. We're up for it. And I'll never forget, it was February 6, 2011 is when I joined. And, I'd come here, got my apartment. I didn't know anything. I mean, Japan was never on my radar screen, unlike a lot of guys. It was never on my radar screen. I even came here for business, but I came, I was handled, I left. So go around the world twice, meet all my leaders. We were kind of like a bank. We had a president of Europe, we had a president of the US, we had a president of China, we had a president of Macintosh, we had a president of Boston. We had, 8 or 9 presidents, president of engineering. We had a ton of VPs, or presidents and VPs. And go around and meet everybody twice. And I'll never forget, on March 11th, 2011, I'm on a plane. It's a really long story, but the short version is I'm on a plane and flying from New York to Canada to Hong Kong to hire a country manager on that Friday and to get here on the Monday. It'll be my 6th day in the country. My boxes aren't even unpacked yet, And I learned on the plane about this disaster, which is a little bizarre, but I don't really understand. Now, frame this up a little bit. My main office, an 8-story building, was in Kawasaki. I had a plant with 450 people, 50 kilometers from the nuke in Shirakawa.
Well, 30 kilometers
50.
is the zone, because I remember when we had the earthquake and the nuclear meltdown, and a lot of, we call them fly-jin, right? The Gaijin who fly out.
That's right.
Go to Osaka, go to Okinawa, go to Hong Kong, go to Singapore, go home, whatever it was. And I stayed. I looked at it and I said, well, okay, Chernobyl, worst nuclear accident ever. What happened?
Yep.
And the 30-kilometre zone was the kill zone. If you're in that 30-kilometre zone, you're in serious trouble. But if you're in Tokyo, you're out of that kill zone. So, okay, we had a nuclear cloud pass over. You couldn't drink the water for a week or so.
That's right.
Vegetables were a problem with, radiation. But eventually, it sort of worked. We had problems with power, all sorts of things came up.
Yeah, we had to cut power by 35%.
That's
or
right.
you're
Power's
fined.
down. And so, but you're like 40, 50 is quite close. That's like seriously
And we had
close.
450 people, and we couldn't communicate with them.
Yeah, that's a serious problem.
My mother, it's so funny. My mother, bless her heart, she's 92 right now. So she sits there and says, when are you coming home? And I go, why would I come home? And you got to understand, I didn't know anybody here. I mean, I knew nobody. So I didn't know everybody was leaving. And I knew I'm the new Sacho, I'm the new boss.
You can't leave. Where are you going?
Well, I never knew that was
Hi,
a
everyone. This is a
Exactly.
major nuclear disaster. Bailey's out of here. I'm bailing out.
And I didn't even know. I mean, I'll never forget. I did a typical American thing. It was, got here on the Monday and went in the office, or maybe it was Sunday, got in the office on Monday. And I did the typical thing. I called my assistant. I didn't even have an office yet because I was a new position. And putting all these 4 companies together. And I called my assistant up and I went by Krispy Kreme, bought 2 dozen donuts. I said, get my team together. I only met some of these people once or twice. And so there was a conference room, kind of the size of this, half the size of this. And I went in there. This is a hysterical story. I went in there and I said, well, we need to have a command post meeting, which no one knew what that meant. But it was kind of something that came out of China for me. And I just took all the chairs and tables out of this room. And, my staff comes in and they go, Tim-san, where are we meeting? No, we're meeting here. Oh, you came from China. Yeah. I don't know, but, in Japan, we use chairs and tables. And I go, and that's it. I thought humor is the best way to handle this. And I go, well, actually they do too. The quality is just not as good as here. And then so we're chatting for a little while, and they go, but Tim-san, we have these PowerPoint, where's the PowerPoint projector? And I was feeling a little bit playful and cocky and competitive. And I go, dude, nobody in here is more of a PowerPoint junkie than me. I said, seriously, there's no time. We have no time. We're going old school. We're going to do like we were in elementary school, and we're just going to tape pages up, and we're going to be here a half hour, an hour, and we're going to go figure what's going on, and we're going to, solve and fix this company. And my HR guy had a 30-page deck. And I mean, he's trembling. He's like, okay. I said, look, I don't mean to be rude, but just show me your last page. That's obviously your recommendation, right? And and this comes across rude, but I didn't mean to be rude, but I'm like, what's your problem? What's the problem? And he goes, Tim said, no water. And I've been to that plant, not only once, but I'm like, okay, well, we have the machines that do this. We don't need water. And he goes, oh, I said, you pissing and smoking, right? And he goes, yes. I said, well, I don't know. In this country, you have spotter pots. Like we have, a baseball game, football game. We got all these portable things. You have those here. Figure how many times someone takes a leak and how many times they smoke. Let's get 50 or 100 of them. Let's move on. Unfortunately, that gentleman didn't make it past 6 months. He decided it was probably better to move on. But
the thrill of working with you is so exciting.
Which would be a premise if I do write a book. That one of the premises would be an excellent time for leadership change is a crisis.
That's true. Don't waste a crisis, we say.
I didn't know that at the time, but it was. And it was amazing. And I still say to this day, that's why I think I'm here, is because of that.
So your job when you were sent here was to run what?
It was 4 companies.
And these are 4 companies merging or 4 separate companies operating independently?
Yeah, good question. They're supposed to be operating together. So Denon and Moran's had already merged and come together. Boston Acoustics, which was a speaker company focused really in the U.S., and Macintosh, very high-end, fantastic stereo company. They were run independently, and that was by design. So put it into perspective, a third of my business was in Europe, a third of my business was in the States, and a third was Asia, and about 60% of it or so was here. Europe was doing well, making money. The U.S. was not. And
so you're running the U.S. from here?
The whole thing.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was I had a chance to go to Jersey where the holding company was, but I decided to come here because the heart and soul of the company was here, the design side of the people. And I thought if we were going to impact change, had to kind of walk the talk, walk the aisles, get to know people. Even though I traveled 60 or 80% of my time for years. I didn't really know anybody. That's why I didn't even really need an office for a while. But yeah, so there were these companies, and the whole goal was to find a way to just turn them around collectively. And it's one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life, but it was actually one of the most rewarding things I ever did in my life too.
So let's walk it back a bit. So you've come in, you've got the earthquake just finished, radiation, clouds running around, no chairs, no desks. Okay, forget your PowerPoint slide deck presentation. Right. I don't need that. So this is really emergency. Emergency type activity. Particularly, you've got a plant only 50 kilometres away from the kill zone of the earthquake area and the radiation area. So at some point that has to settle down.
It does.
And then we have to get on with it, right?
That's right.
So I can understand an emergency, fix all the problems, deal with the people, get things happening, take care of people. Okay, get infrastructure in there to help people. Okay, then what happens after that? Because you're still, as you say, responsible for the world.
That's right.
You're traveling a lot. How do you go about getting the Japan part to work together, particularly if you've got bits of the puzzle may have been theoretically on paper brought together, but actually how much are they together? And then how do you actually make them work together? And then you've got Macintosh, which is going to be separate anyway. I mean, how the hell does all that work? How do you, as a leader, how do you sort of stick all that together?
Great question. And it wasn't evidently clear when we started. Macintosh was a separate entity. And Macintosh, unfortunately, even though I loved that product, we ended up jettisoning it, selling it, because we needed cash to do restructuring.
Right.
And to this day, I'm still good friends with my president there. If you take the Shirakawa and the Fukushima disaster in itself, that itself was a project, because it was shutting down the world. And what we didn't even know, we had a design center up there, and people were amazing. I mean, it was just amazing. And we made our high-end products up there. So let's say 20% of our stuff. So we made other stuff in China and places. But what we didn't know at the time was we also made the brains there, some of these core elements, and we're shipping them to our plant. So we're shutting down even China through that too. So it challenged a lot.
The supply chain, actually, this was like even very large companies.
Chips and everything, right?
Suddenly found, okay, geez, we can't ship. And I think, we never thought about that, but then suddenly you think about it, right? And so you obviously hit that problem straight away.
And it came down with chips. And this was done before me, so I can't take credit for it. There was a guy named Padzon and his team did a great job. But we were qualified on some new chips. And we were sharing some of the same capacity and stuff that Toyota and everyone else was using. So, we're a small guy, they're the big guy. But luckily, we were qualified on these other chips that were made elsewhere. And so we were able to get ramping up and going again. So we had great support, from Bain, from corporate guys, from operations guys that helped us through that. There's a guy named Trevor Dighton that was running our manufacturing globally. And so we had support and help, and we had an amazing work ethic from the people that were there. So park that as a project in of itself. And it was shutting us down, but we had to get that ramping up and going and everything else. And we did.
Just before we go on to the sort of next stage, what about the people? Because, you're American.
Yep.
Okay, you've worked and lived in China. So what? This is Japan.
Yep.
We've just had a major, tsunami, earthquake, tsunami, triple nuclear meltdown. This is like major, right? Everyone's nervous. They're nervous about you.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they don't know you.
That's right.
You come in, there's no chairs.
That's right.
There's no tables.
There's no PowerPoint machine.
So this has got to be unnerving for people. It'd be unnerving if everything was normal. But in a very heightened, tense situation, it's even more unnerving. So how did you go about getting the people to be comfortable, calm with you, to follow you? Because you can be Wonder Boy from America or Wonder Boy from Xinjiang. So what? This is Japan. Doesn't count. Doesn't cut any mustard here. What can you do here? So how did you go about bridging from emergency project, which actually is, as you say, an emergency is good because it focuses everybody unifies their attention, unifies the money, unifies
That's
the
right.
effort, unifies the time, and then we all, shoulder the wheel. That's, in one way, it's a great thing to bring people together, but they've got to be brought together behind you. So how did you get that in that project part to work? And then you get back to, let's ramp up the chips, let's get going on production. That's a secondary thing to the initial stage.
And then there's a whole other piece, which we'll get into, which was now turning the business around.
Okay.
And that was the real job. Come to find out what we learned, and again, there's this gentleman named Pat Zahn that worked with us and did a great job. He had one crisis after another. It was a Thai flood. There was chip shortages and everything else, and became very resilient in how to handle a crisis. The crisis mode was our business. We started to learn. A couple things. One, I didn't do everything right. And I learned some things. I do a talk on the 5 lessons learned of doing a Japanese turnaround, and 4 of them are my screw-ups, which becomes evidently clear very fast. And I've done it with Spencer's group and a couple of different people where I'd sit down and I've gone through.
I must have missed that lunch.
Yeah, and I give samples away, so you would have remembered. People were very happy that day. It was actually mirrored after what Ernie Higa did one time when he did, his similar type talk. A lot of it was just basic blocking and tackling. It was fundamentals. It was relationship building. When I look back, and there are things that I do differently now and I did differently years later, of even how I handled some things. Like I said, I'd like to think I did everything right and well. The ship was moving forward. We were improving. Looking back, there's some things I would have done a little bit different. There was another leader that had been there 35 years. Now I'm his boss. He's a board member. I'm a board member. He was the MD. He was effectively kind of the global guy. And now I've come in to be the global guy. So that was a little bit of a challenge. It was even what I don't think I totally understood, where we'd kind of agree to do something, everything else, but there was winking and nodding going on the meeting that I didn't see, I didn't know, but he was still perceived by many people as the leader.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, we said, we need to go into this facility. We need to look at it. Oh, Tim said, we cannot do that. Oh, it's not safe. Oh, can we look in the windows? Oh, Tim said, we can't do that. And, I got Bain, I was sitting there, we're having these emergency calls every day. And then 2 days later, I have a full report. And I'm like, well, how'd that happen? Well, we went in the building. But you were told you couldn't go in the building. Well, couldn't find out the other leader organized it, and he made it happen, and they listened to him. So it took a little while before I kind of assumed the authority that I had with the title. But a lot of it, I think, was just relationship. A lot of it was going through the blocking tapping and helping people as they went through their processes. I think empathy helped. I'd like to say there was a silver bullet, but there really wasn't. It was, we engaged, we helped. Corporate helped us. We got them some money. We got some things, and it was a collective thing. I mean, we had other divisions helping, my other counterparts helping. This was, literally a village type thing that was going on. That.
And so, if I'm an employee, and I'm 50 kilometres away from the nuclear meltdown, and I'm in the R&D section, we were actually the brains of the outfit here.
In manufacturing.
What do I know about you? What do I think about you? Do I understand who you are? Do I even feel you care about me? Do I think here's some guy from private equity who's just going to come in here and rape us all and take the money? Or do I feel here's a human being who's compassionate, who's sensitive, who's caring, who's really worried about me and my family?
Sure.
And if I feel that, why do I feel that?
Well, and that's fair, partly because of geography. We couldn't even get up there that much. So sometimes what they knew was just from afar, and it's before Zoom calls and everything else. I would say that image and that challenge was probably with my direct team right there in Kawasaki or globally around the world. And because we needed to drive change. And so if you park that crisis there, we had another crisis. I don't want to say it was even bigger, but we ran out of cash. We weren't making money. We had debt. And we had to drive change, and we had to cut, and we had to make big cuts. And that doesn't happen in Japan.
Oh, it doesn't.
And especially not then. So we rallied the people around. Like, one of the things I talk about was we needed to make a case for change. and really drive change. And to your point, so it just didn't look like it was a greedy play, but it was a survivor play. And I got a little lucky that our goal was to be transparent. We were opening kimono to everything. My engineer had 146 engineers. No one knew really what they were working on. We're going to tell you what they're working on. We opened processes, and we were going to have you be involved in the process. So we changed a lot, but it took some time. But one of the things that we did to try to get their support, because we were also going to be cutting at the same time, was we had to make a case for change. So we had a workers' council, not really a union.
But that thing about the transparency is interesting, because in a lot of cases, power is status power, position power in Japan, and it's also knowledge power. I have got information, you don't have it.
Sure.
I've got the information, so I'm more powerful than you.
Absolutely.
And stuff that's secretive or whatever, that gives me even more power over you. But once you open things up, open the kimono up, so to speak, and now you're democratizing power.
That's right.
And you're giving people, again, a direct insight into what's going on, as opposed to somebody's interpretation.
That's
or
right.
Someone's read or someone's angle on what's going on. You're actually hearing what's really going on. That is a really big change in Japan. So that was interesting as you did that.
It was, and the thing about it was the opening of the kimono was interesting enough. So Japan was the design center. Japan was the brain. Japan was the world. You're familiar with midterm planning processes, or West we'd say strategic plan. But what was interesting, Europe had a strat plan, US had a strat plan. Japan, not the core center, had one, and then the center had one, but they were never rolled up. And the guy in the center, and think about it, in most product, like consumer product companies, the world is controlled, in my opinion, by engineers and capital. If you have engineers and you have capital, you can get stuff done. You don't. And it would be like a lobbying play. If the top engineers here enjoyed some people in Europe and they sat there and they'd go have a couple beers and drinks and everything else, they'd say, can we make this widget next year? And they would agree and move forward. I was like, wait a second. Okay, that's great. I get that. But
where does it hook into the plan?
That's it. And how do I know? And how do I synergize and everything else? So one of the things he did was, when we opened the plan was actually for the people outside of Japan to see what's here. But here's the flip on the plan. Now you're accountable to this. So we got 146 engineers, make it simple, and we're going to put 10 on that product. Okay, that's great. We'll make the 10 a product. But guess now you have to commit to a number. And if you don't get to the number, I'm okay with that. If your number can only be 5 million and let's say 20% profitability, this guy can do 10 million and 50% profitability, and it's going to take 24 months to deliver the product. Well, I'm going to give the resource to him. So what happened was we started creating a competitive environment within the company and pushing decision-making down and out of the center. And another big piece to do this was we changed our structure. And it was really structure that I had in a past life, and we call them global business teams. We knew we were great engineers. We knew we were great executors. We were not great at commercializing, and we were not great at ideation, if you would. Kind of this philosophy that I've been very passionate about, that the smartest guy is not the senior guy in the room. The smartest guy is not in the room. He's the customer. And an interesting story I'll never forget. One of my fine program manager people came in and said, Tim-san, we need you to, I'm pushing them to move forward and get products on time, and we need you to, prove this. What am I proving? And it was a headphone, and it was like colors and materials and stuff like that. And I go, why am I proving this? Tim-san, you're Sacho. But who's the customer? 18-year-old girl. I go, what do I know about an 18-year-old girl? Shouldn't you be telling me you want to do this and just ask me for your support and move forward and everything? No, Tim's our process. You need to prove this. And I go, well, okay, we got to get this process revisited.
So immediately you realize there's a huge disconnect with the marketing side and the consumer viewpoint, and we're building whiz-bang tech stuff, but there's no connection for the people who buy this stuff.
It was. And the two big takeaways down the road that I figured out, one was that specific situation is a coaching moment. I sat there and I said, okay, here's the deal. One, I had this philosophy that I was taught from a guy named Steve Sims, Black & Decker, you can't delay Olympics, although I guess Tokyo did. But you can't delay Olympics. You still need to deliver it, and I'm not proving it. So here's the answer that you need to have. One, you need to come back and say you did a focus group, and 82% of the people like this. Or say, hey, Tim's on, we didn't have any money to do a focus group, but, it's white earbuds. Kind of does the same thing Apple does. Apple's white, so we think it makes sense. Or, hey, it's got a leather pad. It's what Merck and BMW does. So we're going to copy that. I said, if you don't have that, I said, and sometimes that works. I said, you got to do something. So I went and gave him 20 grand. I said, the best place in the world to do focus groups is London. It's got a great cross-section of people. I know a guy.
So this is actually designed for global markets,
It's all
right?
global.
So again,
but it was run out of here.
You got an insular Japanese group of techie engineering people who are really loving the tech, but not thinking about the end product and who's going to buy it and the demand, right? So that's a classic, isn't it?
It was classic. And what was interesting about this was, like, to your point, once we came out with like a product that was wood, it's irrelevant. It was a headphone, but it was wood. And the very nature of wood, especially from a Western standpoint, is the variability of wood. I mean, the grain and the colors and everything else. But if you go and look at some cars and you have the wood paneling, which is kind of fake, but it's all uniform, it's beautiful and everything else. My engineers were polishing this damn thing to make it look uniform. And after a while, it looked like plastic. And they were exactly the same. I'm like, no. That's not how we do it.
No, it's the opposite.
It was the opposite. But these were some key learnings. But these guys now, they went to the UK. And I had a gut feel what the answer was. But I would dare not say it. And I knew the guy named Thomas, and he was just a great ID type guy and great with getting customer feedback. So we sent these people out, and now they owned it, and they came back and they delivered it, and it was theirs now. And that's what kind of started the process as we move forward on pushing decision making down, owning it, and from a process and move forward.
When you're telling me the story, I'm thinking about Beats headsets, which was
perfect example.
A zero history idea created that the concept was when you have your vinyl playing or your CD playing, you're getting an incredible quality. But when you've got the headphones on, you're not getting the perfect qualities because the headset is not good enough. And from nothing, those guys built an incredibly huge business because they were consumer focused from day one.
So you've hit on a key point, and I have to be a little careful here for anybody who might have brought those products in the past. We had a very low image of that product early on. $300 product, 15-year-old daughter wants it. She has it, she drops it, it breaks. Now, later on, I think, because they were fantastic branding and they were fantastic at what they did. When I was a kid, the cool kids wore Michael Jordans, right? So the cool kids now are wearing these Beats headphones, and we could talk about that for a while. Later on it evolved, and they did better, and Apple bought them, and it's even better. But here was the key point, and we even talked about Clay Christensen and disruptive markets and everything else. What was very interesting, and one of my early observations for this turnaround, was all the disruption and all the growth, and it's interesting your observation of Beats, all came from outside the industry. Beats, Sonos, all these guys that were how we consume music, if you would.
They're musicians.
Well, what they did was, I think it was the point you just said, they were customer focused. This is a little extreme, but I think for a company that's a product development company that's largely engineering based, the most important thing is the question you ask. So if you ask a bunch of engineers or product development guys, a question, let's say, how do you get more market share, or how do you beat competitor A, let's say Yamaha or Sony or Pioneer, all these great guys. Little tongue in cheek here, but they got 2 knobs, let's put 3 knobs. They got 4 HDMI, let's put 5. They got, this, let's put that. They got 100 watt, let's put 110 watt. Well, what happened was we woke up one day with these amazing units that nobody really could take all the great benefit out of. But no one talked to a customer. The world went digital, the world went mobile, and we were attacking each other. And we were loving it. And we were getting awards and we were competing. And I'd go to a session. I'll never forget, I went to a session, in Dolby, and these guys gave us these awards, and all the competitors came up and Tim's very good, nice job. Next year, we hope to win it. I said, okay, let's keep fighting competition. Well, what we realized was, stepping back, we were attacking each other And all these other people who were out talking to the customers, like Beats, they did a fantastic job. And it was one of the best things to be an eye-opener for us. If I can just digress 1 second to go back, because before we made that observation, when we were trying to make a case for change, I stumbled on the Kodak Fuji case, and I used that as a foundation.
Let me tell you my Kodak story.
Love to hear it.
The president of Kodak came to Japan in 2001. I know that because I'd just come up from Osaka. I'd moved to Tokyo, and I went to an American Chamber event. I think it was an American Chamber event. He was speaking, and he said, iPhones,
Yeah.
these are not going to go anywhere. Now, at that time, we all had iPhones with cameras in them. Everybody.
Yep.
There were flip cameras and phones in those days. And I'm sitting in the audience thinking, I didn't have any Kodak shares, but I think to myself, if I did have one, the first call would be to my broker, get rid of my Kodak shares. Because this guy is a president, he's got no clue that Japan is way ahead already.
It was Docomo iMode, right? iMode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was just shocked. I thought I was just blown away that they were so
Japan had the smartphone
way ahead of everybody.
way ahead of it, and no one even know it. And I will go so far to say, because I talked to the Docomo CTO at actually Spencer's Group one time, and I say this in an endearing way, but I actually think Steve Jobs stole it from here. They came back and said, okay, these guys, they're on their trains, they got this flip phone, and they're on the internet and they're gaming. Now, what he did that they didn't do was they put user experience, they took it to another level. And in your case of Beats, like if you really did a case study, Beats was brilliant. Beats built a business, they did a great job, and they sold it to Apple. What Docomo should have done, sorry Docomo people, because now the facility's closed, they should have sold that to Apple.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. Well, they had what we'd call apps.
They did.
Today on your phone. I remember having apps on my phone way before
So this is why
Apple had apps on your phone.
Hong Kong was early adopter to iPhones, and we were late adopters to it because people were like, why am I going to pay all this money? I already have a smartphone.
Yeah, exactly.
And then later it evolved and everything else.
So but anyway, that's you're
Yes.
telling me your Kodak
Well,
story.
so
So sorry, I just wanted to
no,
make that observation because
but-
I was so
But
shocked.
the problem is everybody knew Kodak, right? Rochester company is a great company, everything else. You know who invented and has the patent on the digital camera is Kodak.
Kodak.
And they never launched it because they don't want to cannibalize their film. And Fuji sat there and so you look at these two companies, and I remember getting in front of a group of people and I said, guys, look, we're going to be Kodak, we're going to be Fuji. Now, luckily, Fuji was a Japanese company, so it was a pretty good, case study because it wasn't like an American company like, okay, let's go follow what all the Americans do, the Wild Wild West Cowboys. I mean, luckily, these guys did it. And, it promotes this philosophy that it's hard when you're in the trenches, but it's a global thing. It's not a Japanese thing, but you want to cannibalize yourself and not have someone else do it. When you're in the trenches, it's hard to see that sometimes, but, Kodak.
Well, they could have.
They could have and should have.
They could have and should have, and they didn't. And they went out. So, and then Fuji moved completely out of that business anyway into something else in more of the medical imaging, et cetera, right? So they found another use case for it. But coming back to, your story about, project emergency, earthquake, tsunami, nuclear meltdown.
That's right.
Okay, now we're going to change the management structure. We're going to change the business. We're going to stabilize the business. We're going to become successful. So a lot of people got to go, right? Now, as we talked about before, in Japan, a lot of people got to go is not a typical sentence anyone's going to say. So how did you manage to have a lot of people actually go and keep the whole thing together as a unit?
First of all, it was expensive, which is why we ended up selling Macintosh, which, on kind of record at the time, I was against. But hey, I respect Bain and what they were doing, and we needed the cash. And that was a way to get the cash, and we need a lot of money to restructure. It was a grueling time, a lot of town halls, a lot of discussions, but ultimately we just said, hey, if we do not do this.
How many people, percentage-wise, are we talking about? Are we talking about 5%, 10%, 20%, 50%?
35, 40% of the team.
35, 40, that's a big number.
Yeah. It was largely here. Because what was interesting here was Europe was profitable.
You're not cutting there.
No, and there was a lady like Terry who was just running this business, even though I drove her crazy, but she was running this business lady and she was doing good. So we weren't cutting there. Matter of fact, we need to invest more.
Yeah, put more money there, yeah.
U.S., I won't mention any names, what was unprofitable and not running well. And we needed to make some major changes.
Which in the States is culturally more acceptable. Yes. It's more brutal capitalism.
Yeah, we did.
And, people got to go, we're not making money. Americans, for whatever reason, will accept that.
But what happened
But what about here, though?
But the problem that was here, which happened to a lot of Japanese firms, right? When the world was growing, and you have this productivity culture and everything else, life was good. But when business starts shrinking, they didn't make any of the cuts, and then our profitability kept going down, and it was just, there were a lot of talented people, but there were too many, and we were working on some of the wrong stuff, which is a process issue and also a leadership issue at the time. So we worked with our council, we worked with Bain, we worked with our leadership, and we made the cuts, and I would use the term voluntary cuts, but it was very, very lucrative. Mm-hmm. One of the 5 lessons learned I talk about is restructure once. Mm-hmm. Our restructuring became a budget for a while. Like we did it 1 year, and we cut, it was 10%. And then, next year,
death of 1,000 cuts.
It was.
Oh, that's
and I take that as a leadership failure.
That's really hard.
It was. And that
because
was a big
the survivors.
That's it.
And mediocrity. Are all thinking, am I next? And then you are next.
That's right. And mediocrity ended up staying, and good people end up leaving. And it's like, how do you rally around everything else? But
how do you rally around everything else? What did you do?
Well, we finally got some successes, and it took a while, and it was painful. But it was, and we all set some businesses, like we had a product service business. So the service had to do the warranty report work and everything else. And bless these guys' heart, our product was so good, there weren't many warranty issues. And you don't want them to make money, but you don't want them to be losing money either. Let's say we'd have a 3-year warranty or 5-year warranty. Someone would come in 7 years later and bring it in. And, our people were such service oriented, they repair it. I'm like, hold on. This is a sale opportunity. I'm not saying punch them in the face or anything, but it is 7 years old.
Wouldn't they like to update the technology?
Yeah, and then it got to a point, and I blessed their creativity. There weren't a lot of sales, so they started learning how to fix Samsung phones and TVs, and I'm like, but that's not our bailiwick. So what we ended up doing is we took like that business and we said, look, in a past life we knew this too at Black & Decker. It's like, that's not our business. Let's find another company. So we ended up cutting heads or offshooting heads through that process where another group took it and rationalized it and moved forward. So it was a tough time. It was the right thing to do. And once we started getting some success on our belt.
But that thing about another group took them and rationalized things, that's also...
It's tough.
Well, that's also a Japanese technique.
It was.
You are now transferred to the subsidiary.
Yeah.
And at the subsidiary, you are disappeared. That is, this is one of the standard techniques. Or for us as foreigners, Tim, you're being transferred to Hong Kong or Singapore, sure, which have got no labor protection at all, and you get fired there and you're out. So that's as foreigners, you hear that news, things are going bad. Next stop, Singapore. Next stop, Hong Kong. Well, I'm gone. But for Japan, the subsidiary is a way of doing it.
The fortunate thing, though, which I can rest at night, my head on the pillow, was I think we did the right thing. It would cost us a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. And we were generous because we didn't look at it like you're bad people. You did something wrong. This is unfortunate. We got to do something about it. Interesting enough, the top commercial guy, I don't even say his name because he was so impressive, a guy named Honda-san. He's the one who had to let a lot of commercial guys go. I mean, like, give you an example. We would do these manual reporting. They do a manual report in a store, get up to a manager, and then they go to the next person, And, a week later, we start the process. Well, who was looking at the last data? And I'm like, they were just archaic processes that we had. Years later, when we had 40% less people, it was all automated, and it was going better. It was through apps and everything else. But interesting about this one gentleman, he went and he had to do the rationalization of the people and everything else, and he did it with great respect and everything else. So when he's done, he comes in, Harry Carey, he comes in, tells me, I must resign. I've done my job. I've let all these people go. Now, in fairness, and I've mentioned his name, I think he's a very sharp guy, but probably we did need a leadership change, and I knew the corporate guys probably agreed with that and everything else. I had great respect for this gentleman that he did it, but I said, look, dude, two things. One, you single-handedly made this company stronger for what you've done. And I said, how can I, repay you or show my appreciation? Western guy would say, give me $1 gazillion. He basically said, well, hopefully you can be generous in my package. And he said, I'd like to do two things. I said, what are the two things? He said, one, I'd like to pick my successor or be a part of the process. I said, okay, fair. And I'd like to go talk to the customers and tell them. Wow. I'm like, how much time do you need? He said, I don't know, 2 months. I said, okay, we'll give you 4 months. And we were generous. And, and it was amazing. That's what's so unique about here. So it was, in that regard, it was a positive.
But for me, when I hear, having lived here for 40 years, when I hear that story that he's turning up, I'm taking accountability for all of us. Yes, I'm the one who had to let the people go, but I'm also going to take my share of the pain, and I'm going to quit. That is real for me. The first words that pop into my head are samurai. That's a real samurai mind to me, and that's what I like about Japan. There's a certain strong core character essence here of also sacrifice and accountability and collaboration.
And I remember
that's a great story.
Years later, a recruiter called up, I did a reference of name, gave it the picture, the story, and everything else. I'm like, look, this is a good guy. I mean, just times had changed, and the skills weren't no longer a match, but he would be very good at this role. And so it just kind of, it's a unique environment, different in the sense of the States. But so if you go back to that time, right? So we had to make some cuts, we had to make some changes. I had 4 pillars, and my pillar really was, it was leadership. Actually, it's on the back of the business card. It was leadership, it's strategy, it's process, and
So what am I looking? Tell people who are viewing what am I looking at here?
It's my puzzle. It's just the 4 pillars that I talk about. Okay. And this is how we attacked it. We looked at leadership.
Just so people can see, on the back of his card, he's got transform and grow. So he's got the 4 parts of the puzzle, which is leadership, strategy, process, culture, right? Which actually is perfect summation of everything. So thank you.
And that's exactly how we attacked it. And so one of the key things was, when we looked at the second point of strategy, was what businesses, what do we need to change? We had some smart people, we had some talented people. We had some leadership issues. We had to change that, but we were kind of working on the wrong stuff. It was evident, we were attacking each other versus the whole world, Beats and Sonos and all these other competitors were coming out with other products. So we had to change our product development process. And like one thing, when you kind of talked about how to get their support, we adopted this thing called a global business team approach.
Global
business team.
Global business team, okay.
So we kind of looked at who was good at what they did, and we were great executors, we were great engineers, but we weren't great at ideation or customer involvement.
Marketers or something like that. Yeah.
So what we did was we would have a commercial person in Europe, we'd have a commercial person there, and we developed these cross-functional teams.
So sort of best in class.
It was best in class.
To come into one team.
It forced communication. It forced talking. And it was, we actually took, and there's a couple guys right now, to this day, 10 years later, we took some Japanese guys, put them in the States. And he said, okay, well, you'll run it commercially, but you'll run it from the States because that's one of our biggest markets for product X. Product B, the biggest market's over there. So we're going to take a Japanese guy here, put him over there. And so they could communicate, they could talk. And that was a big change, fundamentally, of how, because in opening the kimono, and we needed some momentum, we needed some wins. And this whole idea of pushing decision-making down, doing some RACIC things, right, where you kind of looked at the different responsibilities and improved. I bring no value to make the approval process. Plus, I'm going to slow the whole process down. We're going to grant authorities. We're going to push it down. And, it was this...
Now, on that point, one of the big fears in Japan is, okay, great. Authorities come down to me, but with it has come the responsibility. And actually, I've been brought up in business to fear defects, to fear mistakes, to fear errors. Now, I'm not having a big high five with Tim Baby here about my new found authority. I'm thinking, oh my God, I've now got accountability for this. I'm exposed. This is very dangerous. I'm not really sure I want to have that account. I'd rather Tim have the accountability, and I don't have it, but now I've got it. So how do you get around that? Because this fear of failure or the fear of mistakes or, risk aversion is very strong. And, you're turning it, like in a Western context, you give people power and authority, great. They'll take the risk, they'll make it happen. But in Japan, it's like, just hold your horses there, Tim. I'm not so sure I want to do that, thank you.
Great question.
So how did you get around that?
Great question. So we put some guardrails in. We changed some processes. I shared a lot of my personal philosophies, so there's a lot of engagement. Like this idea that says, hey, we value making mistakes. We value, or we wanted to make it a core value, making mistakes and what have you. Now, we don't want to make mistakes that can sink the ship. So we'll probably try to put some guardrails on what those are. But two things will happen if you make a mistake. And it's pretty obvious. One is you're going to fix it. And two, you're going to learn from it. And obviously...
Which is not, you're fired, right?
Correct.
This is where the first fear is. Mistake
and
equals...
proof is in the pudding when they make the mistake.
Yeah.
And what's happened is, the example I'll give you is, so you make the mistake, you fix it. And assuming it's not like a taboo thing, right? Like
if you blow the company up, that's going to be a bit different, right? But we're not going to put you in that position anyway.
It's on a grant authority. But if you made a call, they made a judgment, okay, move on, let's talk about it. Now, you do it a couple more times, we're going to have a much more serious conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think what it comes down to is it also is a lead by example moment. And when the crisis happens, the problems happen, how you handle it, especially in this country, everyone else is going to be watching. Right?
They're watching like hawks.
So, this is one of my, less starring.
Is this one of
times.
your 4 out of 5 points, is it?
Yeah, and there goes many bullet points below it. But so, I wasn't sleeping a lot, and it wasn't that I needed to save the world, but we were a global company, and I just thought there were all these processes of slowing things down, and I want to make sure I wasn't a barrier in that process. So I want to be available for anybody, whoever wanted to call, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever. And I was traveling the world, and I was loving it. I mean, the world was my oyster. Things were great. It wasn't that they needed me. But because I wasn't going to necessarily change the company, but I was going to help you remove barriers and get your resources you need to move forward.
Let me just keep that thought.
Yeah.
Keep that thought. Australians are awesome crisis managers. And one of the downsides of a crisis manager is they create crises so they can manage it. Now, am I hearing Tim Bailey is a crisis manager? Am I hearing that?
I created a crisis because, one of these nights that I was a little low on sleep, I probably didn't use my best judgment. So you know the joke a little bit that a person will come into a room, they got 30 pages, and you're like, dude, that's just too much information. Can we get it down to 5 pages, please? And they just take the 30 font and they get it down to 10 font and everything else. I'm like, no, you missed the point here. I want 5 pages. Just tell me. I don't need to know everything you know. I just need everything I need to know to support you so we can make a decision. I trust you. Move forward. So we had established this idea of accountability and said, okay, well, now we've unlocked what the engineers are working on. We've unlocked what the capital's working on. You commercial people, you program managers, product people, and everything else, now you own this. But once you make that date, you own that date. Mm-hmm. There is, and I'm not a guy who's going to say work nights and weekends, everything else. But once you make that commitment, you don't delay Olympics. So come in and they go, oh, Tim-san, we are going to, I had an office at a big conference room table. They come in and this cross-functional team comes in and come with a report and a presentation. And this guy named Tanaka-san, who I love to death, God, I'm glad it was him and not someone else. He comes in and says, we're going to delay this. And I'm like, oh no. Now, maybe I was a little intimidated by the lady in Europe who's going to kill me, coming in and this is going to be delayed because technically this is one of our new products and we're trying to change the world. And I'm like, no. And I basically, I'll never forget, right? So this guy comes in, he's got his presentation, and I just said, Tanaka-san, this is not worth the paper it's written on. Get out of my office, go fix it. And I do that.
Very dramatic. And
it was. And besides the fact, I was pissed. And it wasn't one of my finer moments. So, my late father had a lot of great philosophies, but one of them was, and I learned this when I was a Black & Decker, and I got to learn a lot about him that I never knew. He would go to somebody and he would apologize, but he would not apologize for the message. He would apologize for the way he delivered the message.
Okay.
So I was like, okay.
What I'm going to say is about to be very uncomfortable for you, but let me tell you what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'm sitting there. That. I got the good angel and the bad angel here and everything else, and I'm like, okay, now this is a problem here. First of all, I got to go tell my boss and Bain, and I'm like, okay, well, so I go. First thing I do is ask my assistant for some Scotch tape. And I come back and I tape the document back together, right? And so I'm like, okay.
Well done.
So then I know I got to apologize. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I got to apologize. You know what? You make a mistake, you got to fix it. Don't do it again. Learn from it. So, I'm like, okay, I should call him in. And, but I'm like, no, I did it in front of everybody. So I got to apologize in front of everybody. So, I go get a good night's sleep. The next morning I come in. And they're typical Japanese table. You got all people sitting there. You got the boss here, and he knew what happened, and he knew both points of views. He knew mine and his, right? But it was his guy, and so I go in, and I stand over top of it. Hey, everybody, and I'm pretty loud, Hey, everybody, good morning, whatever the case is, and everyone's heads down because they knew I chewed this guy out, this team. And I go, hey, Tanaka-san, how you doing? Good. And I said, and I had the presentation all taped back together, and I go. Remember this? Because, I said, listen, I got to tell you, I got to come clean. I didn't really love the message, but I didn't handle this properly. I said, listen, my apologies for that. And, I sincerely apologize. And I said, hey, I'm not going to, make excuses. I didn't handle it well. I want to help you guys. Can you get the team together? Let's come back in. Let's try to address it. So there was 2 things of this. One, it now proved when a mistake was made, even when the boss made it, you go fix it, move forward, right? So now fast forward.
But also, you are proving to people you are not God. And you don't think that you are God. And you are showing a human flaw, weakness, a vulnerability in terms of admitting in front of everybody that you didn't really handle it very well. Now that, when position power is part of your status and your personal ego, etc., doing that is not such a simple thing. It's much easier to say, well, eat it up, too bad, because I've got to keep myself intact and move on. But to be able to do that, to show that vulnerability, that's impressive.
And I was fortunate. It's kind of Coke, new Coke type thing. I was fortunate that that problem happened. And I tell you how that changed things. So fast forward 4 years, 5 years later when I leave, they had my going away thing. They had ripped it up and taped it. So I then
they all write the card, right?
So when
The
I
messages?
sent in the Christmas holiday card, I had ripped it up and taped it. And I mean, to this day, so it ended up being
A meme in a way.
it was, and it was the example, and it was one of the pivotal change moments in doctoring this philosophy as we move forward. So I can give you one more example if I can. So now we launch all these products. You know, we got PowerPoints, got everything else. We're great and everything else. And guess what happens after the first year of launching all these new products?
Not selling.
We failed miserably.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, now, am I the problem here? What's going on here? I'm like, I mean, you know, we were pointing the finger at each other. Now we started making lifestyle products. This is a little too technical, but do you remember the old iPhone? It was a 30-pin, everything else. Well, so we launched the product. And as soon as we launched the product, Apple comes out with a different pin structure. Now we got all this product that we worked on for a year. It's obsolete. I mean, it was just like, how is this happening? How is this happening? How is this happening? So,
well, I love Apple because every time I get a new phone, I've got to get a new bloody connector for the damn thing and go and spend the money. It's like, oh, this is a license to print money with these people. Like, what? And then it doesn't match the other damn things you got for the power connector or hooking into your computer or hooking into your iPad or something. Trust me, I've got that problem right back there in my office right now, and I just drive you nuts. So don't worry, I'm with you on that one.
The one thing is, it came evidently clear. I was like, okay, was this another mistake? Was this another problem? And there was a gentleman that I went and I found, a guy named John Carter out of California, older gentleman, twilight of his career, doing independent consulting, but he was with Bose early days when they came up with the first headphones and what have you. And he wrote a textbook like you've done on new products and everything else. So, and it's another great guy named Kaz that was working, running the PMO. And I just said, dude, you know, I don't know if it's my ego, I don't know, whatever, but this didn't work and I got to find out why. And I don't know if I'm the problem. I don't think I am, but maybe I'm not looking at it right. So I said, I brought this guy in as consultant, and then I brought all these product development leaders in, and I said, effectively, you guys go into that room for 2 weeks and come back out with something.
Work it out.
And I won't go in there, and my chief engineer won't either. So now the chief engineer had been there 35 years, who had an iron fist control, and you got me who's bouncing off the wall, saying, oh, let's do this. Can we do this? How about a headphone that does this? How about this? I'm like, oh my God. And they came out. And this goes into my lessons learned type things. One of them was developing a PowerPoint or a plan or a strategy without the people, process, or skills to do it will never work. And, you know.
So let's go through that. The people, the process, and the skills are the three critical
templates,
factors there, right?
And we didn't have it. And like, give an example, what we didn't know, and you would probably appreciate this for your tenure here, PMO, Project Management Office, typically, which is very strong in Japan, not always used in other parts of the world, was typically a function under engineering. That's how it ran. And engineering in most of these companies ran the world. But companies like D&M and other companies that started to utilize outsourcing more, let's say it was China or other functions, things changed. So it wasn't engineering controlling everything anymore. It was now how you manage a supplier or different inputs, everything else. So what happened was, because we had PMO underneath engineering, we were missing it. I needed PMO above engineering. And the only way to do this was, and this was not so fun for the gentleman that was running it, was I went and tapped a guy, this guy named Kaz. He's fantastic. You know, actually, there was a lady in Europe who told me about this. I said, this guy is a rock star, but he's just sitting at the table. No one knew it, right? I mean,
because he's in the hierarchy.
He was.
And he's not at a particular point in the hierarchy that's significant yet.
But I figured out, ex-consulting guy, got his master in Austin, Texas, spent 4.5 years in Europe. I'm like, he'll get it.
He'll get it.
He'll get it. So I pulled him aside. I said, basically, a couple people say, you're wonderful. And, you know, we've become friends ever since. But I said, here's the deal. I'm going to bring PMO out of the engineering group. I'm going to move you to another floor so you can't even see each other.
All right.
And I'll make a deal with you. Focus on this for a couple of years, make it happen, and I'll give you whatever you want. like career-wise, what do you want to do next? And he did it, and it was amazing. So it was these fundamentals.
Yeah, that must have been challenging for him if the chief engineer's got a massive,
that was his
iron
boss.
hand control on everybody. For him to then come out and actually sit above the engineering group, that must have been incredibly difficult internally. And also, what about the chief engineer? He didn't quit?
Later on he left, but not right away.
Because you can imagine the face is lost, he's patron of all these people underneath him, and then he loses power.
And let me clarify one point.
Makes it difficult.
Let me clarify one point. When I say above, that might not be the right word. He was above, in my mind, the cross functions of all teams.
Right, okay.
And what I came back and I said a PMO, this was my philosophy. I said, here's the PMO. I said, you are the CEO of the project.
Mm-hmm.
You are the guy I fire, I joke a little bit, if it's not successful. Mm-hmm. But you're also the mother that needs to go hug and help everybody be successful.
Right.
So it was this push and pull.
Okay.
And it worked. Mm-hmm. And it worked. And to your point, there were tough times at first. And that's why I physically took him off the floor and put him in another floor. So he didn't have to see him every day and his move forward. But slowly what happened was when we did the second and third generation products, now, because they fishboned everything. They went through the whole thing, and they came back, and they showed me where we need to support them. We had to get some different skills. We had to change our process. It uncovered where we had product development process. So to your point of change, in a sense, because I kind of opened the kimono up, and we brought other people in, and they owned it. And we were never allowed in that room. And then they came out, and it was their deal. It was their thing. And I'm like, okay, we'll support it, move forward. And then it was great.
Took off.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were it was tough times for a long time, but it was really rewarding afterwards.
So, Tim, if someone called you up and said, hey, Tim, look, I've been given this big job in Japan. I'm going to run the company as a CEO. You've been there for a long time. You've done everything. You've been through the mill. What would be some advice that you could give me to be an effective leader in Japan? What things would you advise them to do?
I had a hunch you were going to ask that question. So I thought about it a little bit. If I can, I should have probably came back and fake it. But so I got it down because I've actually had these little thoughts of my own over the years where I've tried to help some different people. And I got it down to 7 things.
Okay.
And I'll do it quick.
Great.
Number 1 is I think it's a mental mindset. When you're coming here, you got to know what you're getting yourself into, and you got to be mentally prepared for it, which also means you got to get your family prepared. I mean, it's different if you're by yourself, but if you're coming with a family, and you got to be thinking about this, right? This is a family decision. Move forward. This is a very consuming role and job, and a lot of learning versus giving back. So I think number 1 is making sure you have the right mindset that you come in and you do have that commitment, and also the family's commitment is to do that.
Well, I'm just looking over here. Let me just reach back and grab this book I wrote called Japan Business Mastery, chapter 36. Specifically, I wrote this chapter. I said, chapter 36. Japan is a graveyard for change agent leaders.
Nice.
And this chapter says, you better talk to your boss in your home country before you take this job on and get some air cover.
That's right.
Because the sorts of things you're going to do are going to be disruptive.
That's right.
And there's going to be difficulty, and it's going to be hard, and you've got to get people to back you when things aren't going well at the start. So right with you on that one.
Well, and if you think even Spencer's CI group, right, where we have all the guys come in, one of the biggest challenges most of these guys have, now I ran a global business a little different, but most of these guys was trying to explain to HQ how this world is different. They would spend a lot of time doing that.
Anyway, that was, we agree on number 1.
So second point, and it's not as much rooted in a spiritual religious thing, but it plays off the Serenity Prayer in the sense that it says, have the courage to change the things you can, accept the things you can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And what I mean and how I apply that is, okay, you are a Western person who's coming over. You may be called Gaijin, whatever the case is. Best that you understand the culture, you adapt the culture, you're respectful of the culture, but you also come over with a strength, and you can't let that at the door as you move forward. So the challenge is, and this is the wisdom piece. The wisdom piece is we do a lot of great things in the States. We do a lot of bad things in the States, bad practices. We do a lot of great things here. We do a lot of bad things here. How you can assess and try to find a way to optimize and kind of make this new recipe. And it's kind of also finding the balance of timing too, because just because it works there doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work here. Maybe it can. I won't mention the PE firm, but after I left E&M, moved forward, they had bought $1 billion top line company, and I was helping them. They met with me and they go, Tim, so we want to put an incentive program together, especially our commercial guys. We don't have one. And I'm like, okay. So I said, and they wanted to adopt a U.S. one. And I go, hold on, be careful. I said, you have a strength here, and you want to make, like I tell them, the only thing worse than not measuring is measuring the wrong stuff, right? Driving the wrong behavior. So I said, if you don't totally understand the drivers that are behind this, both motivation and deliverables, you could create a problem and take something you have a strength and destroy it.
And money isn't necessarily the only answer in Japan,
right.
because it may be the answer in the States. And, I have the same thing. Companies, they talk to me about, we brought in this great incentive program. It's not working. First question, what's the base salary that you're paying your people now in the sales department? Are they getting commission, or are they getting bonus, or how's it working? They're getting a flat salary, which is extremely high. And you're wondering why the incentive process is not working. I'll tell you right now why that's not working. You're paying them too much.
Yeah.
Why would they care?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't understand that. You think, well, America give them more money, they'll be more motivated, they'll go. So I get that straight away.
So what we did was, what the proposal was, do it over 3 years, basically. He said, first, just incentivize the group as a whole. Let's say you got,
As a team.
As a team.
Yep.
And then as you learn a little bit more and you're communicating this whole idea, guys, we want to drive behavior and benefit and everything else, then maybe break it down next year into a regional standpoint, and maybe there's 4 different regions. And then maybe the third year you can get it down to more of an individual type thing and move forward. But measuring the wrong thing or driving it, and it's try to find this balance. I remember, and it's not too dissimilar of the East and the West, or Japan and maybe some Western principles. And I'm not going to mention names, but I'm in Shirakawa. We're in our manufacturing site. We're doing these town halls. Somebody from the holding company comes down, and they're speaking through translation and trying to support me and what I'm trying to do, and starts talking about Kaizen events that we're doing in Kawasaki, and we should be doing it more in our manufacturing site, which is a little comical that an American guy is talking to Japanese about Kaizen, but and so just to kind of imagine the room, right? Imagine 40 people in a room, and he's saying we should do this, we should do this, we should do this, and one gentleman raised his hand, and he says, "Mr. X, could I be on one of those teams? And I bet you have a good idea how you should handle this, but the way it was handled was not well. The leader of the holding company that came in bit his head off."
Oh.
You're a leader, right? Why do you need my permission? Just make it happen. You don't need my permission. Just do it.
Right.
And if you think about the Japanese mindset, right? And I know you know this more than I do. Yeah. So think about this one. This 35-year-old guy had to hear maybe English and Japanese translation, had to form a thought, had to look around the room, had to read the room, had to decide, well, should I say something? Do I have a thought? Can I translate it back? Boom, raise a hand, do everything else. I pulled that guy aside afterwards, and I'm like, look, there's only one way to respond to that. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your support. We'll be in touch with you.
Please join the team.
That's right. Because you basically just told 39 other people, don't raise your hand.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is like
a classic disastrous approach.
But this is where you just learn, right? This is where you learn as you move forward and everything else. And, you hope you're making more positives and negatives and what have you. Okay,
what are the
keep
points
going. So simple one. Listen.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hard when we like to talk, but sometimes sitting on the hands at the same time then.
Well, you are a very fluent and articulate man, and I'm just wondering, how did you learn to shut up and listen? Because like me, I got a lot of opinions, I got a lot of experience, got a lot of ideas. I like to share this stuff. I like to talk a lot. Let me tell you what I think. But as you say, you got to like zip that and sit back and let people talk. So how did you manage to make the transition?
I'd like to say it's a learned skill. I don't totally have it yet. I'm still working on it.
I think I'm still working on mine too, don't worry.
It's funny, in casual dialogue like this, I'm probably not as good as I'd like to be. I have learned to be better in a structured environment. And what I mean by that is we would, in the spirit of communication, we would put these global calls together, let's say launch a new product or a new initiative. So you'd have Europe, US, and here, and let's face it, it's always evening time zone here. So I'd take the group out, get a bite to eat, have a beer, lighten them up a little bit, and then people would talk. And, when you got an agenda and you want to move fast, hey, anybody got any points, any comments? No, okay, move on, next one. No, hold on, can't do that. So I would ask for feedback. And if I went to my local guys, I got, nothing. So what I learned to get them to talk and get some listen is I would go to Europe first. And I go, hey, Mr. Europe, any thoughts or feedback? They give a little thought and feedback. And I go to US, everything else. And then I'd come back to these guys. And what happened is, so now they've read the room.
They've had a time to think.
That's it.
As well.
Yeah.
They're not on the spur of the moment, and they've got to do it in English.
That's right.
So again, these are levels of complexity.
So when I would get into structure type things, I like to think I was really good at that. I still had to work a little bit on the the one-on-one type stuff, that if it wasn't top of mind, but yeah.
What's next?
Next thing, communication. I mean, it's just you think you've said it, you think it's been communicated down.
I sent them the email.
Yeah.
I sent them the email. That's done.
I said at a town hall meeting.
Yeah, I told you.
It's on a poster.
Yeah.
It's in the hall.
We're done.
Obviously, this goes without saying, but relationships are important. And I mean, you could say it in every part of the world, but, there's an after-work culture here too, as we all know, and spending time with people and talking to people. And I just don't underestimate the relationship. It's interesting. To this day, I still have, and I've been gone a while, I still have amazing relationships with my old guys. It's not like we're out drinking every night and doing stuff, but if they have a problem or I need something, help and guidance or insight, they would go back and forth. So the next two are more personal and inward thinking. So one is find a right-hand guy or a coach, or maybe both, or get a group like Spencer's group or something. But what I have found, and I was lucky, I had two guys. One was a Japanese guy, one was an American guy, and in their own way, one was a junior guy, one I would say is closer to a peer. One guy could come in and just punch me in the face, the American guy, and go, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? What do you mean? Well, you just destroyed that guy, or you just, you did. No, this is good. This is, no. And they could be a voice of reason to come back. And like, for instance, the more junior guy, he came in and he goes, Tim son, so-and-so, it's not feeling so good. Maybe if you go talk to him. So having people that can read, I don't want to say the room, but the world, and experience you and give you feedback. And the way you reward those people is when they say do something, you go do it. Like this guy said, he's feeling kind of down. So you go do it. Because, without that insight, and this is where even like a CEO type group that you could be on, or a coach or someone else, I don't want to say it's lonely at the top, because I'm not saying I was really lonely, but, who are you going to confide in?
Well, it is lonely at the top, because you can't talk to your wife about or your partner about these problems, because it's just too complex. You can't talk to your subordinates about it because you're the boss. Right. You can't talk to your boss about it because he says, well, you're taking care of it, take care of it. Who the hell do you talk to? In fact, as a leader, often you've got no one you can really open the kimono up and talk about your deepest fears and concerns, that you feel safe.
That's right. No
judgment to do that. That is not that easy to do.
And I will say, one of the benefits on like that CI Insight group that we're part of, for 10 years, it was very interesting to be able to hear other people having some of the same challenges in different industries, and this sense of camaraderie. I remember I went through an issue once. I'll never forget. It was Jarl Lima. We were in this group. He heard something, and I don't know this guy that well, and he pings me. He goes, "Let's go have a coffee." And we sat down, we talked, and he gave me some insight. It's like, so whatever it is, if it's good if you could have somebody within your group. Like the idea is, if you're going to go to another country, go to another place. I'm not saying necessarily bring somebody, because you almost want somebody who can read the tea leaves there. But having some insights and somebody who can kind of really punch you in the face and say, "Hey, dude." And the last one is, I think, make sure you take care of yourself.
And what does that mean? I
think it's like, don't undercut the value of sleep and exercise and all these other kind of things. It's like, you like to think at times you're Superman and what have you, but I know at my worst was when I was not sleeping as much. And if I was a little curt to you, I justified it. I mean, because you weren't pulling your weight. But then I go, wait a second, that's not what a leader does. And it took me a little while to learn that. And even, I had the philosophy, you sleep when you die. It's not my philosophy anymore, but that was my philosophy.
I just think that's a very American way of looking at things. I thought to myself, coming from Australia, where it's like totally lifestyle central down there, and work to live or live to work. What are we doing here? But that's a good 7 points.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it helps when I
points.
chat with other people. Sometimes maybe some resonate more with other people. But I mean, I look back, I was never staying here. And I'm not one that came.
And so you've been here for how long now?
14 years. 14 years.
I came for 2.
Yeah.
It turned into 40.
I came to 4 or 5. And, and it's, people, I go back home, some of my family is convinced I'm a spy. Because they don't really know what I do. And I always have a great story for them, which they think a spy is going to have that story. But kidding aside, I mean, it's now kind of where the friends are. It's the business strength. And, and I've now migrated more. I do my own independent consulting where I help private equity and do some transformations or due diligence projects or what have you. And from a karma standpoint, I started helping some startups. I just having a cup of coffee with young people. And that's started to materialize more and more.
That's interesting.
Is a karma give back.
Well, Tim, you and I would have no difficulty going for another couple of hours. I know that instinctively. I think we've just even barely touched the surface here in many areas, but you've really come through with a lot of great insights. Now, as you know, I send you the questions we're going to go through, and we didn't go through my typical question format because your business is a little bit different from others. You've got a different range of experiences, but you've really shared a lot of great insights, experiences, hard-earned experiences too with everyone. So thank you. Really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.